If you love movies and movie discussions, you come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz. I'm here today to review the 1953 drama Tokyo Story, directed by Yasujiro Ozu. Ooh, I hope I got that name right. So, Yasujiro Ozu is a director that, honestly, I wanted to watch for quite a long time. But like many other types of movies and many other types of films I've wanted to see, I always choose something else with the intention of seeing it another time. And I think that's one of the best things about doing this podcast, is I get an excuse to see these films I've always intended to watch, but never got around to. But Ozu is specifically interesting because of the filmmakers that he's inspired and that love him. Like, there are filmmakers like Paul Schrader, Martin Scorsese, and others that just adore his movies. And this is considered his crowning achievement, his best film that he's made. And I've always been curious to watching this movie. What I did not know is this is actually part of a trilogy, and this is the third of that trilogy. So I don't think it really matters if I see these out of order. So I think I'll be fine watching this and reviewing it, not knowing what happened in the other two movies. So let's get into it. Let's get into the review of Tokyo Story, directed by Yasujiro Ozu. Before that, let's get to the plot. An elderly couple takes a long journey from their small village to visit their adult children in Tokyo. Their older son, a doctor, and their daughter, a hairdresser, don't have much time to spend with their aging parents, so it falls to Noriko, the widow of their youngest son, to keep her in-laws company. That is essentially the movie, and I think you might be surprised that this is a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, and that's really all the plot is about. I think the one thing that you will notice when you watch the movie right away is that the visuals are very minimalistic, but they're very effective the way they are. There is not a lot of camera flourishes, there's not a lot of interesting camera angles, or the camera really is only there just to point at the actors and let them do their thing and talk and everything. There's nothing really extravagant that the film does when it comes to the style of the camera, but I think that's what makes it so effective in this movie, because it just tells you nakedly what's going on. It's telling you just to react to what's going on instead of just telling you what you should feel. And it's incredibly effective in this movie because it's really just a quaint, small story that actually speaks a lot more than you would realize in this movie. But what I will say is that because of how slow the movie is, I wouldn't say it drags, but it definitely takes its time to make you feel what the elderly couple is going through and how to feel about it. But at some point in the film, it hits an emotional wallop. And it does it in several spots. And I'm not going to spoil as to what those spots are. But when it does happen, it is highly effective. And it really works well in this movie. Like, it's not a very performative film. It's very to the point and direct. But it does make you feel very emotional at the end. What I will say, if there is probably one thing I want to note, if there's one point I want to discuss, I don't think it's a negative, but I think if you are looking to watch this movie, maybe this is your first foreign language film, I would want to point this out, is that the cultural difference may confuse some from the United States. Yet it still may work for some. What do I mean by this? In the United States, specifically, because I'm in the United States, that's not really a new thing. Our culture does not value older people. We just don't. And it's sad to say. I can remember numerous times when I was young and I would talk to people my age, or even, I'll even be honest, when I was older in my 20s and 30s, and we talk about older people, and it would always be, oh, they don't get it. They're stupid. They don't know anything. And don't listen to them, this and that. When really they are people that are full of wisdom and somebody we should talk to. I talked to Zero about this. In Japan, they honor their elderly. They show reverence to them. They appreciate them, which is the exact opposite of what we do in the States. So I don't know if this was popular in Japan, but I can understand, like, in Japan, they would probably watch this movie and go, oh my God, how sad, how terrible. How can you disrespect and not appreciate these people that have raised you and turned you into what you are? But in the States, this is very common. A lot of people in the States don't respect their elders. They don't respect their grandfathers, their older parents. They just don't in the States. So I think some might look at this and go, well, yeah, they're at their own lives. They can't really expect them to actually turn their lives around just because they're around. I don't know if it will confuse some when it comes to watching this movie in the States, but even though that's not the case of what it is in the United States, I still think a lot of people will find this rather moving to watch. All right, so here are the footnotes for Tokyo Story. I'm just going to talk about the themes about Tokyo Story. So my first footnote is, this is a story about making time for those you love. I'm not going to spoil anything else that happens in the movie, but this is a very clear thing that I think Ozu was trying to talk about in this film. Is that basically you have to make time for those that you appreciate, because you won't have all the time in the world to do that. But I mean, it's a very common thing to think about that I think still a lot of people have a hard time thinking about doing. Is this something that this film does show? And my other footnote, this is a story about kids overgrowing their parents. I think this is the most effective theme that the film has. It really shows how these older kids, these adults here, I don't know if they mean well. I honestly think most of them are dickheads, to be absolutely honest with you. But it really shows how parents, when they're growing their kids and everything, they have an attachment to their kids because they spend so much time raising them and doing everything they can to make them grow into humans. But then what's at the end for the parents? Are they going to get that back in return? Most often in the States, no. Honestly, I know a lot of people who send their parents to nursing homes, or the parents have to fend for themselves because the kids are too busy for them. And it's sad, and it's something that this movie shows incredibly well in this. It's a very complex movie in that way, because on the one hand, I can definitely understand why some would say, well, these people have to live their lives too, and I agree. I agree that they do have to live their lives, but on the other hand, these are people that raised you. These are people that made you who you are and loved you and did everything they could to make you the way they are. Shouldn't we show more reverence for what they do in the States? And I would say, yes, we should. And that's the thing that I think that really resonated a lot with me watching this movie. It really reminded me of how in the United States, we show reverence to youth more than we show reverence to wisdom. And on the one hand, I kind of understand it because we are a country that relies on new ideas and new blood to carry us forward. But on the other hand, it's kind of why we have the problems that we have nowadays, because we look at older people and look at them as burdens, as people that just don't know any better and they should be ignored and should not be even considered in anything, or honestly should just crawl in a hole somewhere and just let us do our thing because whatever reason it is. Like, I don't know what the reason would be on that end, but it is interesting that this film elicited those emotions for me, because when I watched this, I was like, oh my god, this just reminds me of just how people are nowadays with old people, and it's incredibly sad, and it's highly effective in that way. So overall, I'm going to recommend Tokyo Story. It's a beautiful movie. I think it is a very effective movie in its minimalistic visuals. I honestly think that the story is quite moving. It is slow. It does take a while to get to the conclusion of the film. It is about a 2-hour and 15-minute movie. But I think it's effective for what it does, and I think it's worth the time that you're going to put into it. Just be prepared to elicit more emotions than I think you might realize. So overall, I recommend Tokyo Story. It is on Max. It is on Tubi. It's on a lot of places, actually. So if you Google it, you can find it on, I believe, Amazon Prime as well. So check that out if you haven't given it a shot. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.